we're going to do step one once again. Let me take you back. And this is not really cheating. We're actually just looking at what's there. We're simplifying, as I always have suggested. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide how big do I want this to be. Now I'm looking at the clock and we have just under the hour. So we're going to make this a 1 hour drawing. If we want to make a drawing like this really detailed and really kind of taking our time with it, it should be anywhere from about 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Obviously, you could take it way further than that, but we're going to go for that, for the 45 to 50-minute drawing. So I want to make it, I don't want to make it too big. That way I could work a lot of light and detail into it. So number one, I want to place it on my paper. So the main structural line that I want to find here is obviously, as we looked before, how far forward, this one here, and how big is the head going to be. So I'm finding my top, my left, my right, and my bottom, just about here. So that's how big my head, my horse head is going to be. Now I want to see this as a very simple shape as well. And I want to get a good sense of the angles. So my face is not squished, meaning once I'm getting started with my drawing, my face doesn't look like something squished it, or it looks way longer than it's supposed to be. So I'm just starting with very light lines. You may not be able to see these yet. So I want to make these clean, and I don't want to have to erase so much later on. But it's basically the same, looking for those triangles that we saw earlier, and beginning to see just a little bit better, a little bit easier, those main, not the main, but those main lines. So notice that you can begin to see some of these lines, how it goes right into the jaw here, and that brings it straight up to this point, which is where I measured the ear. Making sure I take my time to set this up as best as I can. Really, really study it. Go over it. Step back away from it. Sometimes turning it upside down works. So I'm going for this little triangular shape up here, which will later on become one of our ears. And it kind of lines up straight with this one here, just at the tip. So a little bit sharper. So here I'm also thinking of the hands of a clock, making sure I have those right, the angles properly. See, I reached the top up here, so my ear is going to be touching the edge of the paper there. But overall, if I can look at this, and I know there's an area of horse that's going to come out of here, I just look at this line as that main. Perfect. Now, what would be my second step here? I could begin to look a little closer, and this is dangerous because you're going to want to start adding detail. But there's a way you can add contour. For example, here at the front, what you want to do is avoid trying to start drawing finalized shapes or details. Plus, we're not working off of the actual reference yet. I'm just looking at this little gap here where I could add some curvature. Same thing here with the jaw that I'm going to soften up with this line now that I don't need it anymore. And before we start looking into the light, the mapping of the light. So next, I'm going to want to identify major feature right here. which would be our eye. And again, in the same way we did before, I'm going to try spot some verticals. Some areas where I could just gently kind of guess it for now. It's not like, okay, that's it. Once I put it here, it's done. That's where it goes. No, I could shift it as other things begin to come together later on in just a second. And I take a good look at it. Look at some distances, for example, from this area of the ear, the eye to the bottom, to the chin here, to the jaw. How it just, if I were to run a straight line, how it just goes right through the corner of the eye. So maybe it's a little more forward. And also the size of it. I want to make sure the direction and the size of it begin to line up like it's supposed to. Now this is what's bothering me so far. I took that line a little too high, and I want to see more basic structure. Okay, so far, so good. I have my structure. Next, we're going to do the mapping of that light that we talked about, which is this right here. Now, this may be tricky because if you don't have a good drawing yet, how am I going to map a light? Well, we're looking mostly on the inner areas of what we have pretty much set ourselves up for. So squinting, oh my gosh, it almost looks like another horse shape in the light when I squint at it. So that's the only thing you want to do. You want to kind of size it up, begin to see very general areas. So what I'm doing here is I'm squinting a lot, closing one eye, and just as if I were drawing a map, I'm going to follow those lines. See, so my eye feels like it's a little too high when I look at this map. So make it a little bit bigger, maybe. That could work. This is a little rounder, and I'm not going to mess with this yet. But I continue the search in the map. Now, how detailed you want to make a read of this map? Yeah, you could go ahead and make... So, for example, if you see some of those light details right in and around the eye, you could go ahead and do that now. But the key would be not to make it too confused. Wait, was this light or shadow? Later on. So the more lines you add, the easier it is to confuse yourself in just a second. So once again, trying to keep it basic, minimal, kind of simplistic. And they don't have to be the actual exact shape of it. You could give yourself some simplified lines, more geometric if you have to. So this worked out well. I follow the map and it's getting me kind of just all the way around, following some of the smaller little maps of shadow. And what I mean is some of these darker spots right here. Right here. Not making my lines too dark yet, but in a second you'll see them come together. And this one's shooting right up at the eye. And again, all you want to see is just forms or little shapes of light and shadow that will, little by little, come together. Going down here, now I don't see the edge or the background here, so I'm guessing it goes right. So I see like a letter U here that comes straight down again, and that's where I'm going to base this little map here, because it's another big area of light. that just fades out. As it comes around, you could see lots of muscle, and we'll work that in. But with these maps, structures and maps, you're going to find, I believe, so much easier to find your way. And I am going to add just a few more here. I see one little shiny area of light down here. Just a few right about here. So I'm looking at now at that white feature, the white stripe, with a few touches of light here and there. Very, very small, but seem to be kind of important. Now I look at this map here and I look at how these shapes almost come together closer, almost touch as I work my way up. I look at this, it becomes the shadow shape. It almost becomes something else for me to read. How the distance from the eye to the edge of it pretty much gives me the clue that I'm looking for. And bringing it down without too much. It's not really rigorous, like it's set in stone. I'm just giving myself extra lines. And at this point, I think I have just about enough. If I were to add more, it's going to begin to get confusing. So for now, I know that this area, I'm going to do just a little bit of, so you guys could see. That's going to be my darkest area of the map here. And obviously down in here and over here. But I'm going to save it just a little bit so you guys could, because the one thing I don't want to do is all of that erasing. And I want to make sure I get those lines like I told you guys before. Okay, so here we go. If you're still working with that light shadow map, I'm actually going to hope you see it when you look at this over here. So notice that it's really, we see it. Oh, wow. Yeah, there it is. Light, shadow. But notice how, wow, we could actually really define. And the key when you draw anything and you want to draw anything with a little extra realism is to see this. Because anything you look at, you're looking at how light affects it. So this form, these beautiful structures, muscles, hair, we see them like this, and we try to replicate this. My biggest, strongest recommendation, learn how to see it like this, and before that, like this. That's going to get you there. Okay? So let me give you guys just a few more seconds as I sharpen my pencil once again. Let me open up the chat, see if anything's going on. Okay, and let's continue. So far so good. It looks like it. Okay, here we are. So now we have the reference. So I made lots of little lines, nice little maps. What kind of sense am I going to make out of this? Let me go ahead and zoom in just a little bit more so you guys could see it a little bit closer. And I'll move it around just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so here we are. Now the next thing I want to begin to work on, and I'm still working with the 2B lighter pencil. Sorry, this is still moving just a little bit. There we are. What I'm going to want to do is I want to fight that urge to begin to start drawing detail. But at some point, I do want to recognize some of that edge, some of that space, background. how it relates to my subject. Squinting, closing one eye so I could see the negative space like we did last week. You guys remember those shapes, hopefully? When we're not drawing this, but the actual space of it. And we're going to do that a lot here. And another thing is when we start seeing it within. So for example, here, we're looking within the figure to develop some of those negative shapes, negative space shapes. As I go along, I'm going to make some of these areas that I know are darker. Just start filling them in with a few lines. As I also clean up my structural lines that I made a little extra dark so you guys could see them. I'm going to go ahead and clear some of those out before I start moving along. And there we are. So one other tip, one other recommendation is start light and work your way from light to dark. So one thing I could do right now is I know this is my lightest area here, but everything else, except for this white stripe as well, everything else is some degree of dark. And as I begin to add some of this shading, I could add it all over, everywhere, really, except those few spots that I know are really, really white. Here, right there in the middle of the eye. And when I squint really hard, I'm going to put it right here and just a little bit right here. But even within here, I could add very light lines